In the high valleys of the Hindu Kush, there is a face that history struggled to explain. For centuries, travelers, soldiers, and colonial administrators stumbled into the Chitral district of northern Pakistan and believed they had found a biological impossibility, a pocket of the ancient Mediterranean, frozen in time. With their light eyes, fair skin, and a polytheistic faith involving wine and wood-carved idols, the Kalash people became a living Rorschach test for the West. To the officers of the British Raj, they were the lost mutineers of Alexander the Great's army. To romantic historians, they were a pagan island in an Islamic sea, a biological ghost of a vanished Greece. It is a compelling cinematic narrative of isolation and purity. It is also, according to the genetic record, almost entirely wrong. The myth of the Kalash relies on a specific kind of intellectual comfort, the idea that human populations can remain static, like insects trapped in amber, if only the mountains are high enough. We want to believe in the living fossil because it suggests that somewhere the past is still reachable. But the reality of the Kalash is far more complex and significantly more instructive about how humanity actually functions. They are not a Greek colony lost in the mountains. They are a signal of a much older, much deeper world. The disconnect between who the Kalash look like and who they are reveals a fundamental truth about our species. Cultural resilience is not a byproduct of genetic isolation, but a specific strategy of survival. To understand the Kalash, we have to look past the Greek blue eyes and into the deep architecture of the human genome. When we sequence the DNA of a population, we aren't just looking for origins, we are looking for the frequency of signals. In most of Eurasia, the signal is a chaotic noise of constant movement, the result of what geneticists call population turnover. Waves of farmers replace hunter-gatherers, horsemen from the steppes replace the farmers, empires collapse and rearrange the map. Most of us are a blur of these migrations, but in the Hindu Kush, the noise quiets down. Genetic analysis reveals that the Kalash possess a unique signature that diverged from other Indo-European populations not during the time of Alexander, but thousands of years earlier, likely during the Bronze Age or even the Neolithic. While the rest of the world was mixing, the Kalash were experiencing a drift. This isn't the result of being chosen or pure. It is the result of a bottleneck, a sharp reduction in population size, followed by long-term environmental confinement. The mountains didn't just protect their religion, they acted as a filter, slowing the genetic flow to a crawl. The physical traits that so startled European explorers, the light pigmentation, are not evidence of European ancestry. They are the result of a founder effect, where specific traits within a small, closed group become amplified over generations. It is not the presence of Greek genes we see, but the absence of the genetic mixing that defined the rest of the Silk Road. This is where the story stops being about a specific tribe and starts being about the mechanics of the human threshold. We often confuse culture with biology, assuming that if a people speak an ancient tongue and worship ancient gods, their blood must be equally ancient. But the map of humanity wasn't written in a lab, it was carved by the sea and the stone. This is Helix Horizon, where we trace the code that refuses to stay still. By examining the Kalash, we aren't looking at a Greek ghost. We are looking at the remnants of a pre-Vedic world that once stretched across the Iranian plateau and the Indus Valley. They are not a deviation from the norm. They are a preserved snapshot of a transition that the rest of the world simply forgot. The genetic reality of the Kalash is less a story of an arrival and more a story of a remaining. To trace their lineage, we must look at the massive demographic shifts that occurred across Eurasia between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago. In this period, the Steppe Hypothesis suggests a vast movement of people from the Pontic-Caspian grasslands into the Indian subcontinent. In the lowlands, this migration was a totalizing force, rewriting the genetic and linguistic landscape of North India. But as these populations pushed into the vertical labyrinth of the Hindu Kush, the momentum of migration changed. Genetic modeling shows that the Kalash share a deep ancestral component with the Yamnaya, the nomadic herders of the Bronze Age, but they lack the subsequent layers of genetic admixture that characterize nearly every other group in Pakistan and Afghanistan. While their neighbors were being reshaped by the expansion of the Persian empires, the Kushans, and eventually the Islamic conquests, the Kalash remained within a narrow genetic corridor. This is the signal in its purest form. They represent a baseline, a genetic control group for the ancient Indo-Aryans. When scientists compare the Kalash DNA to that of ancient skeletons found in the Swat Valley, the continuity is staggering. They are, in biological terms, one of the few populations on Earth that has remained on the same ground, relatively unmixed, for over 3 millennia. However, the Greek myth persists because it is visually convenient. When we see a Kalash child with blonde hair and green eyes in a village, like Bumburet, our brains seek a historical narrative to explain the anomaly. We reach for Alexander the Great because he is a known quantity, a bridge between East and West. But the ghost we see is actually a byproduct of a biological phenomenon known as high genetic drift. Because the Kalash have practiced endogamy, marrying strictly within their own small community for hundreds of generations, rare recessive traits that exist in all Indo-European populations became concentrated. The light eyes of the Kalash aren't a souvenir from a Macedonian soldier. They are an exaggerated echo of a common ancestor that we all shared 10,000 years ago.
This brings us to a critical correction in our understanding of human survival. We often equate isolation with weakness or stagnation. In the modern world, we view genetic diversity as a sign of health and isolation as a precursor to extinction. But the Kalash flipped this script. Their isolation was not a passive accident. It was a cultural choice that allowed them to navigate a lethal geopolitical environment. To maintain their identity as the last pagans of the Hindu Kush in a region that underwent total religious transformation, they had to build a wall of social taboos. These taboos, laws regarding who can be married and which valleys can be settled, acted as a biological shield. The genetics didn't create the culture curated the genetics. This interplay between the social and the biological is where the true mystery of the Kalash lies. They exist at a permanent threshold. To their neighbors, they were Kafirs, infidels, and their land was Kafiristan, the land of the unbelievers. In 1896, the Red Kafirs were forcibly converted to Islam by the Emir of Afghanistan. Their wooden idols burned, their culture integrated into the modern state. The Kalash, by a quirk of colonial geography, fell on the British side of the border. They survived not because they were stronger, but because they were situated in a geographical shadow where the reach of the state was weak and the cost of conquest was high. The Kalash are a case study in what happens when the noise of history is blocked by physical geography. Most human groups are like rivers, constantly merging and changing their chemistry as they flow toward the sea. The Kalash are a high-altitude lake. The water is the same as the river, but its stillness allows us to see all the way to the bottom. What we see there is not a Greek soldier, but a hunter-gatherer from the Iranian plateau, a farmer from the Indus, and a herder from the steppe, frozen in a specific ancient proportion. They remind us that ancestry is often just a measure of how much time has passed since your last major demographic disruption. This stillness, however, creates a secondary illusion, the idea that the Kalash are primitive. In the hierarchy of human history, we often mistake lack of change for lack of complexity. But to survive at the threshold of the Hindu Kush requires a highly specialized cognitive and social architecture. The Kalash culture is not a simplified version of modern life.
It is a sophisticated adaptation to a specific pressure. Their religion, centered around the god Mahandeo and a pantheon of mountain spirits, is a functional map of their environment. Their rituals regarding pure and impure spaces aren't just spiritual dogmas, they are mechanisms that manage resource allocation in a fragile ecosystem where one bad harvest means the end of a lineage. The genetic data supports this narrative of high-stakes adaptation. When we look at the Kalash genome, we find signatures of balancing selection, genetic markers that have been maintained because they offer a survival advantage in high-altitude, low-oxygen environments. This is where the biological and the cultural merge. The Kalash didn't just survive in the mountains, they were refined by them. The ghost we seek in their DNA is actually the ghost of our own ancestors' adaptability. They represent a branch of the human family tree that decided to stop moving and start deepening. But this deepening came at a cost. In the language of population genetics, the Kalash suffer from decreased heterozygosity. Because the gene pool is so shallow, the population is vulnerable to the noise of the modern world. Today, the greatest threat to the Kalash isn't a lack of purity, but the sudden, violent introduction of connectivity. Roads, tourism, and the internet are doing what 3,000 years of mountain isolation prevented. They are breaking the filter. As young Kalash people move to cities or marry outside the community, the unique signal that defined their population for millennia is beginning to dissolve into the global average. This dissolution reveals the ultimate irony of the Kalash story. For centuries, we obsessed over their true ancestry, trying to link them to the legendary empires of the West. We wanted them to be Greeks because that made them part of our story. But in doing so, we missed the much larger story they were telling about humanity's story. The Kalash are not an exception to the rules of evolution, they are demonstrations of them. They show us that identity is a tension between the code we inherit and the landscape we inhabit. They prove that a group of humans can maintain a distinct biological and cultural signature for thousands of years, not because they're pure, but because they are resilient enough to resist the entropy of the surrounding world. As the Kalash ghost begins to fade into the modern demographic of Pakistan, we're left with a final, unsettling realization about ourselves. If a population as distinct as the Kalash can be misinterpreted for so long, what else are we misreading in our own genetic signatures? We tend to view our history as a series of grand arrivals, invasions, conquests, and founding fathers. But the Kalash suggest that the most important parts of our identity might be the things that didn't happen, the migrations that were turned back, the marriages that didn't occur, the isolation that was never broken. The map of our species is a palimpsest of these missed connections. We are the sum of the movements we made, but we are also defined by the refuges where we chose to stay. The Kalash were simply the last to leave the refuge. Their story isn't a footnote in the history of Alexander the Great. It is a primary text on the nature of human persistence. It forces us to ask, when the mountains finally fall and the last filters are removed, what remains of a people? And if the Kalash are the ghost of our past, who is the ghost of our future? The answer may lie not in the mountains of the east, but in the sunken landscapes of the north, where another population once defied the movement of empires by vanishing into the soil itself.